The Ukrainian Defense Forces have liberated the village of Yudakne in the Donetsk region, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Ukrainian defenders have raised the national flag there. Yudakne is located about 10 kilometers from Pokrovsk. Ukrainian troops destroyed all enemy strongpoints. Before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, more than 1,500 people lived there. Footage has also emerged showing the liberation of the village of Novoekonomikne. The day before, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that it had come under Ukrainian control. Judging by the released footage, the clearing of the village was carried out by soldiers of the 425th Separate Assault Regiment Skala. It took Ukrainian soldiers 2 weeks to gradually advance, meter by meter, through every street.
You could say that the situation has been stabilized, and moreover, it will turn out well. The counterattacks we are carrying out are working. We are gradually reclaiming settlements. First, we retreat in an organized manner, inflicting as many losses as possible on the enemy. Then, when possible, we stabilize the front line, and after that, we launch counterattacks. Now, speaking of these counterattacks, about Yudakne, about our flag that was raised there. But we don't do this for selfies, like the Russians do. When we raise our flag over a settlement we've taken back from the Russians, it means we have full control over it.
Meanwhile, in the Lyman direction, the Ukrainian battalion Signum reconnaissance discovered and precisely struck a Russian Hyacinth B gun, a Soviet-era weapon with a 152mm caliber. It's designed to destroy enemy personnel, equipment, fortifications, and even artillery at long distances. At the same time, in the Lyman direction, the enemy army attacked near the settlements of Karpivka, Kaladayazi, and toward Dranivka. On the Kramatorsk section of the front, Russian occupiers attempted to advance towards Stopaki and Predtekine. And near Toretsk, fighting took place in the areas of Shurbanivka, Yablonivka, and Poltavka. In the Pokrovsk direction, the invaders tried to break through the Ukrainian defenses near Mayak, Von, Myrolobivka, Myrnarad, and Promend.
The fighting has been going on for over a year now. And from a third to half of all combat clashes in the entire war are happening precisely in the Pokrovsk direction. Well, Pokrovsk, Myrnarad, Kostantinivka, that is, this is basically the place where the enemy has concentrated more than 100,000 fighters. Commander Sursky has spoken about this. 111,000 was the number mentioned, but that was already a few weeks ago. There were estimates that it could be up to 200,000, so there is a serious concentration of Russian troops there.
Pilots of strike FPV drones from the Separate Special Forces Unit Wings of Omega of the National Guard of Ukraine discovered an enemy firing position and hit a self-propelled howitzer with high precision. Its crew regularly shelled Ukrainian units. Thanks to the coordinated actions of the defense forces, the occupiers' artillery system was completely destroyed. Soldiers of the 3rd Separate Heavy Mechanized Iron Brigade successfully hunted down enemy vehicles. Crews from the Sarmat group found carelessly camouflaged Russian buggies, motorcycles, and Ziguli cars in the forests. As a result of precise hits, the occupiers' equipment was burned to the ground. Over the past day, Ukraine's defense forces eliminated 800 Russian soldiers. As a result, the total losses of the Russian army have exceeded 1,083,000 personnel. In addition, over the past day, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 1 Russian tank, 4 armored vehicles, 53 artillery systems, 1 multiple rocket launcher, as well as 170 drones and more than 80 units of automotive equipment.
Pavel Lekichuk, head of military programs at the Center for Global Studies and Strategy XXI, is with us today. Pavel, welcome. Hello, glad to see you.
Good evening. Good evening. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Pavel, I don't know about my colleagues, I won't speak for them, but I also feel like this is something we all sense, this feeling when we read the General Staff's reports, especially about the directions. I constantly get this sense of deja vu, because basically, yes, nothing has changed in the last 6 months, maybe even longer, but I'll say at least 6 months. Nothing changes in the directions where the Russian occupiers are carrying out assault operations, right? It's the Pokrovsk direction, plus, we've also called it the Southern Slobozansk direction, and so on. And today, Toretsk has appeared. We haven't talked about it for a long time, even though it was mentioned a few times, 3 or 4, however many times. But now Toretsk has come up again. We'll talk about Toretsk separately in a moment. But if we're talking about those directions that are traditionally mentioned in the General Staff's reports, as I understand it, there's basically nothing new here. The Russian army's objective is still to take these. Well, let's call them these heights. So basically, the report itself doesn't really change, but the number of assault actions does fluctuate from time to time.
But behind these numbers, there are actually some really big things going on for it to seem like nothing changes. the Ukrainian defense forces have to put in incredible effort. Today is September 2nd, and already yesterday many journalists were asking, so how's it going? Did the Russian summer offensive fail? So will there be a Russian autumn offensive? But it's General Gerasimov, chief of the General Staff of the Russian Federation, who responds to all of this, a figure, by the way, who isn't very public. But just the other day, he made a public appearance. I'm not going to comment on that map, the one that was deliberately highlighted not just for Russians, or rather, for Russians as well, by Russian propagandists in the report from the Russian Ministry of Defense meeting. But the essence of this whole act, when you get right down to it, is the same. The summer, so-called, well, we call it the summer, but actually it's the strategic offensive operation of the Russian Federation that was planned for this spring, really did fail. Why, from the Russian perspective, did it fail? Because the operation is a single set of actions coordinated in time, place, forces, and resources. And for these actions, the calculation of forces and resources was planned out by the day, by the hour, by the month, by the week. 2 weeks were allotted for breaking through the defenses. For this, a certain number of divisions were allocated, a certain amount of ammunition, a certain amount of fuel and lubricants, bandages, blood, and everything else needed. They failed to break through the defenses within the set time frame. They have to throw in the second echelons, those that were meant for breaking through the defenses, again to try to build on any success, and they have to replenish the forces lost during the attempted breakthrough, which still isn't happening. Those same ammunition and fuel supplies are once again used to continue the attempt to break through. And in 4 months, the Russians really did not manage to achieve a strategic breakthrough of the defenses. Yes, there have been tactical successes, but the goal of a strategic operation is precisely a strategic breakthrough to reach the operational space. That's it. Gerasimov is already saying that they will regroup and continue the so-called special military operation. Basically, behind all the bravado, the meaning is the same. The plans they had for a strategic offensive operation have failed. They need to regroup their depleted forces, redistribute their available reserves, their human resources, and their essential material, and then reorganize for a renewed offensive. For now, we see that the directions of the main attack remain the same. I don't know, nobody knows. Maybe the GR already knows what the plan is, what the Russian command's intention is under the changed circumstances. Maybe there will be other directions, but most likely, the main directions of attack for the autumn-winter period will remain the same. That's why Pokrovsk, which has been the key, the main focus of Russian efforts, still remains so. Lyman, which has been a flanking strike, remains as such. Kupiansk, which was needed to secure north-south logistics, still remains important for that. There are tactical successes. The Novopavlivka direction. We have problems, we have huge problems, but it doesn't solve the strategic objective. Toretsk, Chasiv Yar. The situation there is very serious, which could even lead to local encirclements of our forces. Our command is aware of this and is partially redeploying forces, sometimes in one direction, sometimes in another. The same goes for Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk, the main objective for the Russians right now. Their initial push failed, so their goal is to encircle Pokrovsk, essentially to surround it. Putin needs a Debaltseve 2.0, even just for negotiations. But that's not going to happen.
And here's some new information. Yes, related to losses. About 2,000 North Korean soldiers have already been killed in Russia's war against Ukraine. This was reported by South Korean intelligence. In addition, Pyongyang may send about 6,000 more soldiers to the front as part of the third wave of troop deployments. Since October of last year, North Korea has provided about 13,000 troops and weapons to support Russia in its war against Ukraine. In light of this news, there are actually a few questions. First, do you believe the numbers reported by Korean intelligence? After all, we understand, right, that the number of troops they're sending and the number of casualties, well, they mention 2,000 killed, but they don't say anything about those who are wounded. We don't really know how that process works, whether they're sent back, treated, or how it all happens on their end. We know that it's rare for us to hear any numbers specifically about North Korean soldiers. And what truly motivates them to persistently keep sending their brave troops, knowing full well what the incredibly low survival rate is for the Korean soldiers? That's something that's interesting too.
And what motivates Putin, by the way? Let's go back to Gerasimov's statement. Gerasimov says that it's necessary to increase the pace of mobilization. So basically, the mobilization resources that the Russians don't make up for, the losses in personnel, the current losses in personnel, that's why they need more people. What motivates him to throw Russians, Buryatis, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Koreans, Belarusians into the meat grinder? Putin. He doesn't care at all. He's the one throwing people into the meat grinder, obviously. I don't know. It's a twisted mind, some kind of Herostratus-style glory. The same thing motivates Kim Jong-un. We're not talking about society, the country, or the state as a whole, because these are authoritarian regimes. Both Putin's Russia and Kim Jong-un's North Korea are, for the most part, monarchies, hereditary monarchs. In North Korea, it's hereditary. In Russia, not yet, but it's taking shape. And here, the opinion of the people, well, it has a third-rate, third-tier significance. What matters most is the will of the Tsar, the will of the chieftain, the will of the leader. That's the whole motivation. Well, you could also add, since today all three of them have gathered in Beijing, and also the unwavering will of yet another influential leader, one who meticulously puts on a deceptive show of absolute neutrality to the global community, but in stark reality, is the primary and undeniable patron and financial sponsor of the oppressive North Korean regime, and is now, with increasing influence, steadily becoming the undisputed master of the Russian regime as well, exerting significant control and direction.
Pavel. And then to continue, yes, I agree with you here. Yes, just as you said, perversion. Yeah, well, there are different things here, obviously. I just remembered when you were talking how Kim Jong-un came to Russia in an armored personnel carrier that time. Do you remember? I think they met somewhere at Baikonur. Well, that was some time ago, and they were sorting things out. He was asking for food supplies because hunger is a real problem in North Korea. Well, there you go. First it was ammunition, now he's sending people. That's just how it is, yeah. Then some publications have recently reported that supposedly North Korean soldiers won't be participating anymore, that the need has supposedly ended. Yeah, it's over. Although it's quite surprising too, because as we've extensively discussed, the Russian Federation, sorry to put it this particular way, I sincerely apologize, but they've definitely entered entirely new markets for military manpower, right? And in many other countries, sometimes through deliberate manipulation and sometimes through outright deception, like with those individuals from Cameroon, who, well, they're not actually trained soldiers, but rather people who are genuinely looking for a significantly better life. They ultimately come to Russia.
Cameroonian mercenaries.
Yes, mercenaries, yes. But later, as they get captured, they say they thought they were coming to work at a shampoo factory, right? Because these are real stories they've told. Well, they ended up fighting on the front lines and so on. It's clear that the situation with reserves is pretty complicated. Let me continue. Tell me something. It's been a while since the issue of mobilization was brought up. Obviously, it's a very sensitive topic. It's on the edge in the Russian Federation. Don't you get the feeling that at some point, Putin will skillfully, as they know how to do, present the issue of general mobilization in such a way that it's like we're practically on the verge of victory, so it's necessary to mobilize. So please, Russians, come on, join in and go to Ukraine. Or is it already too late because, well, when it's the fourth year and when, yes, there's a huge number of people killed in the Russian Federation, those who came to supposedly conquer Ukraine, is it already too late to talk about general mobilization?
And who is going to ask these Russians anyway? It'll be however Putin decides. The Supreme Commander-in-Chief in the Russian Federation is Field Marshal Putin. Putin makes decisions about the mobilization of the economy. Putin makes decisions about mobilization about the mobilization of human resources. Yes, right now it's more beneficial for him to try to solve the problem of understaffing by other means. The method, there is such a problem, and Gerasimov talks about it. That is, Gerasimov, as the commander-in-chief, the chief of the general staff, informs his supreme commander, the supreme commander-in-chief Putin, that there is a need to increase the number of personnel in the troops. How can Putin address this issue? The first, this is already a worn-out method, is to try to increase bonuses, to once again create a kind of hidden mobilization among the disadvantaged segments of the population. This mechanism is already working very poorly. The second option is to carry out a partial or general mobilization. This option is the one Putin fears the most, because the partial mobilization in 2022 and 2023 showed that, although the Russian people verbally support Putin's war, in reality, they have no interest in personally taking part in it. The third option, which is also quite possible, is mercenaries from abroad, like those same Korean soldiers. It could also be Belarusians. Right now, strategic command and staff exercises called Zapad 2025 are being conducted in Belarus and in the western districts of the Russian Federation. These are both Russian Federation command and staff exercises and joint strategic exercises with the Belarusian army. And here, Putin also has an opportunity. Considering that the Belarusian army is filled with Russian agents, not even agents, really, but rather, the Belarusian army is so deeply integrated into the Russian armed forces over there. There are educational institutions and experience exchanges. Basically, the officer corps is unified between Belarus and Russia. And Putin has long wanted to take control over Lukashenko's army. It's not a huge force, I mean the combat units, but these are already trained troops. Trained, equipped, clothed, armed, and have undergone combat coordination. This is exactly the number of personnel that can temporarily fill this mobilization gap. And I think Putin has no intention of asking Lukashenko whether he needs this army. And Lukashenko understands that these exercises could end tragically for him. How events will unfold in the near future is hard to predict in reality, so these exercises pose a threat not only to European countries, to Ukraine, but also to Belarus itself.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we'll keep an eye on these events, yes, on how everything develops. Thank you very much. Pavel Lekichuk, Head of Military Programs at the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21, was live on the Freedom Studio.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.